Hello, and welcome to the Improvement Nerds podcast, where we host conversations about the things that nerd us out. The idea behind the Improvement Nerds podcast is to invite guests onto our show and give them a platform to talk about the things that make them nerdy. And as they share their ideas, we want to explore the important question of how does that idea intersect with improvement? We're curious about multiple types of improvement. Improvement of self, improvements made by teams, improvements made by organizations and communities of people. We even want to know improvement that's occurring at a larger scale, possibly with a societal impact. During each episode, we, along with our guests, will explore the topics that person's passionate about. The things that, when they're doing them, make time pass without any effort. The things that seem more like play than they do work. The things that are possibly that person's true calling. As we explore the topics that make us and that guest nerdy, we'll explore the why behind that passion and understand the purpose that idea is bringing to that person's life. We'll allow that person to teach us a little bit and share with us more information about that topic so that we can explore the idea for ourselves. Then, we'll look at how that passion intersects with improvement. In other words, we want to know how that idea makes us better people, better friends, better employees, better leaders, better insert whatever role might fit. We're excited to have you join us on this journey as we and our guests nerd out. Hey everyone, this is Tom. Really excited to be kicking off episode 5 with you all. It's been a journey. I've had a lot of fun creating the previous episodes, and I'm really excited about this one. My guest is the author of an upcoming book, The Minivan Mogul. You can look for that shortly. Should be around summer that book becomes available. She's also the owner and founder of Practically Speaking with Alex. You can find her on her website at www.pswithalex.com. Really excited to share her story and nerd out with her as we talk about the idea of communication. Hey everyone, this is Tom with the Improvement Nerds podcast. I'm here with a special guest that I can't wait for you guys to hear from. Is Alex Perry. And I've met Alex through the LinkedIn community as I stepped out from my role in healthcare. That was our initial connection, was working in healthcare and having that in our background. And then trying to come out and create something in the form of a new business that inspired people to pursue their passions and through their work to take ownership of that and do things that were in the intent to better serve their customers or to position their organizations to achieve breakthroughs. So as I started to write my thoughts about those things, Alex sought me out and a relationship blossomed from there. So I'm excited that you're here with me today and that we're podcasting together. And the conversations I've had with you, I've already learned so much. And I know in this podcast, people listening to this are going to learn a lot as well. So why don't you start and just give us your background and introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Alex Perry. I am the owner of Practically Speaking, where I focus on communication and public speaking and storytelling. I come from healthcare, so that is the premise of the background of my business. So I believe strongly that we all have this incredibly precious gift of being able to talk that we take for granted. So in my background, speech language pathologist, I worked with people who either lost their ability to speak or never had it to begin with due to accident or illness, injury, things like that. And so when I launched Practically Speaking, it's really to help people every day in the corporate world, in the business world, be better communicators because you're going to ask me very quickly what I nerd out about. I nerd out about people talking and being able to do that effectively.
Yes, and as you and I started to build our relationship, I did some research on you. You've been doing this for how long?
So I have been doing this for 5 years. Practically Speaking will be 3 years old in June. So,
how is that equation work out that the business, this type of work is 5 years, but the business is 3 years. So were you moonlighting, or talk a little bit about your launch and coming out into creating this business of yours?
Yeah, so when I decided that I wanted to be in coaching versus be in healthcare, so switching from that therapist role to really a coach and supporter role, I did a Google search like most people do. The truth is that I thought I wanted to be a CrossFit coach. I spent about 3 minutes looking at the viability of that option and my age and the fact that I love my CrossFit gym and don't want to go into competition with them. I'd never win anyway. And so I was like, well, what can I do? I have a master's degree in speech language pathology. What can I really do with this? And I knew that there was a tiny little niche in speech language pathology that looks like corporate speech language pathologists, and they really help people with accent reduction and being better communicators. I did a Google search and so happened to find a firm in Carmel who was teaching executive presence, public speaking, storytelling, accent reduction, and she happened to be hiring.
Double whammy.
Double
right?
whammy.
Yeah,
So
right
dun, dun, dun. And I sent in my application, I applied for the job, and I got the job. I learned a ton. And I also learned, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs learn this, that it can be a slippery slope working with another entrepreneur who very much has their model in mind. And I'm a nonconformist, especially in the realm of public speaking.
Okay, so nonconformist equals boat shaker, right? Like,
I don't always want to play by the rules, and I want to test things out and see if they work. And I'm a firm believer that, especially in the world of public speaking, that there needs to be some changes made. We need to shake this up a little bit, and we need to change how we're looking at and evaluating people on their communication skills, that many times we're assessing them in the wrong areas. So anyway, all of that to say, I left that job and still moonlighting as a speech language pathologist, and I had decided there's no way I'm opening my own business. Lots of people are saying, do it, go for it. I'm like, no, I am not a business owner. I have no interest in this. I'm not an entrepreneur. I will not. No, thank you very much. I left that job in April. And so I'm moonlighting. I'm trying to figure it out. I end up in a church sharing part of my personal story, talking about how I left this job, wasn't sure what I was going to do, blah, 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 blah. I get done with the talk. A woman comes up to me afterwards and says, hey, Alex, I want to hire you. I'm like, but I don't really have a business. I mean, I had the idea.
I do now.
Thank you to my very first client who you're in a church, for goodness sakes. The whole world telling you should do it.
Yes,
so
all signs point to yes.
All signs point to yes. So I went home, I looked at my husband Clark, and I said, well, I think I'm going to give this business a go. He's like, okay, 2 months. We'll see if it pans out. That's a solid business plan, by the way.
Yeah.
2 months. And so I launched Practically Speaking. I got a little $5 Fiverr business card that looks like Star Wars. It's really...
Well, that's a good design aesthetic for almost any business. And I would purchase and consume any services that had Star Wars associated with it. Like, it's just got
I
that
said
brand
looks
equity.
like.
Oh, yeah, I forgot the like word.
The like word, which is really important because, anyway, thank you to the person on Fiverr who designed it for $5, but it got me started. And so from there, I bootstrapped my way to here. And almost 3 years of doing this on my own.
Great. And I have seen your network and the influence that you have through LinkedIn. So in that 3 years, I'm sure you've met a lot of wonderful people. And I think it's interesting that coaches, as we seek them out, we think like they've got it all put together, and you're one of those coaches who will admit I'm still learning. And I think also probably in your journey you'd say that you've learned just as much about this type of work from the people you were coaching and advising, and getting their perspectives on life. I think it's that relationship between mentor and mentee that oftentimes like the mentor is the one who benefits the most. So I'm sure as we continue this conversation, we're going to hear stories about things that you thought you knew, that as you went out and you worked alongside these people and you tried to help them, in some ways they were helping you. So
amen. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So true.
What an awesome journey, and thanks for getting us started and sharing your background. So we did kind of mention, you put it out there, that there's something special that makes you nerdy. So I'll let you revisit that. What is that one thing that nerds you out?
I am a nerd about all things communication, all things talking.
Okay.
So if it's talking about talking and how to be a better talker, then let's talk about that,
Okay.
please.
So, and you're not wearing glasses right now, but
No,
I picture you like just pushing them up the bridge of your nose right now.
Putting my hair back in a ponytail and saying, let's go, like rolling up my sleeves. Can we please talk about this?
Yes. So we talked about a little bit of the how you got into this from like a professional perspective, but to get on a pathway like this to become a clinician around speech language pathology, you had to have gone through extensive education. So your journey had to start well before you actually formed a business, as you decided you wanted to be a clinician and you wanted to help people communicate as a caregiver. And that just eventually led to you being a business owner. But what led you to want to enter this field before you got this education and started down this path?
So as far as becoming a speech language pathologist, it really started with knowing that I wanted to be a caretaker, that I wanted to take care of people. I initially started off in nursing.
Okay.
And so landed in some type of awful molecular biology course that I was completely unprepared for.
Yeah, I would have been out too. Like, I was
left
interested and curious, and then if I had to go to a class like that, I'd be like,
I'm done.
we're going to leave this to the pros.
Yeah, I'm done. So I walked out and I panicked and I'm thinking, well, I got into the nursing program. Please get me out. And I don't know what to do. And at the time, I'm in college with my sister and lived with my sister. And so she looks at me and she's very analytical. She's very incredibly smart with numbers. And so she does a very quick review of all of the jobs that were popular at the time. And she finds speech language pathologists. And she says, look, this is on the top 10 list of jobs in upcoming careers. I had a speech language pathologist when I was a kid, and she had an S problem. And she's like, I loved her, and I think you have that kind of personality, so let's check that out. So I took a 101 class and thought, yeah, this looks good. This looks good, and so I launched into the program and did all the work and explored all of the things. I was one of those therapists who said it didn't matter if it was a brand new NICU baby or if you were 105. If you were a human, I wanted to work with you. So I did all the things in speech language pathology throughout my career.
Okay.
And then ended it at brain injury. Did that for 6.5 years and worked at community on the brain injury unit. So,
and I think in your promo video for your business, as you talk about the extremes that led you to understanding the necessity to make this leap was those patients that you worked with towards the end of your career, and that catastrophic event likely happened, wasn't planned. That person had plans other than that, and those plans now can't be communicated, or the visions they had in their head can't be spoken. And it was kind of like a wake-up call in some ways, at least interpreting your video, that no one should wait to the point where something has happened that now is the catalytic event to where they want to say something and they just can't because there's no rewinding the clock. This has happened and this is still a person here, but they just can't share the information the way that they could have beforehand. So you wanted to go out and try to beat that clock and help people say what they needed to say without ever risking being silenced for some other reason.
Yep.
So,
absolutely. You phrased that very well. Thank you.
Yeah, and that was like a 3-minute video, and I loved every minute of it because I felt like behind the scenes, that was what was, obviously anyone who watches this video, they're going to see that you're very passionate in the video. You're talking with your hands. There's tons of energy, but it's also really, really real that none of us know what's going to happen in our lives, and we can't take any one moment for granted. Whatever situations we find ourselves in, let's be present and participate and try to communicate and let people who are there around us know that we love them and appreciate them, that whatever ideas we have in our heads, that we want to share them with others and invite them to offer their ideas too. So that little video, I was hooked after watching it. And
Thank you.
So people listening to this, find that video and I guarantee you're going to be hooked too.
It's so interesting that you say that because it extrapolates out into so many genres for people. So obviously there's the tie at home and with the people that we love, but also at work and being a great communicator at work. And how many times have you walked out of a meeting or conversation and thought, I wish I had said.
Yes.
I wish I had spoken up about. if only they knew my idea.
Yes.
Or many of the folks that I work with have a personal leadership story or something that they want to share, on a stage or in a presentation, and they're so terrified to do it.
Yes.
Nobody wants to listen. Who's going to be interested? I'm not that special.
Yeah.
And I look at every single person and say, you have no idea.
Yeah.
Number one, how much your idea is needed, how much your voice is needed, how badly someone else needs your story, even if it doesn't sound like somebody else's story, or it's been a story that's been told 1,000 times.
Yes.
We need to hear it from you because you are what makes it unique, not necessarily the idea itself.
Yeah. And I think this gets us to the question about why is this a passion of yours? And it's very obvious that you see a person's voice has a gift, and that through that gift they're able to do amazing things, but oftentimes they're not exercising that gift due to limiting beliefs or fears. So in some ways, you're that person who's showing up and helping them to understand there's really nothing to be afraid of. So talk to me a little bit about your why and why this is such a passion for you, like getting people to use that voice.
So why it's so important for me, aside from just being exposed to so many people and watching what happens when you don't speak up or speak out, for me, this has been a challenge my whole life as well. So I'm a naturally decent talker. I know how to speak. I'm fairly articulate. And standing up and sharing my story, standing in it and owning all the pieces of it, that's been challenging. And sitting in meetings and knowing, I acutely know what it feels like to have not raised my hand or to have walked out and thought, if I had only shared that idea. I've also been on the flip side of that and shared an idea and had it not go well, or gotten the feedback, your timing is off, or this is wrong. So there's an aspect of, I understand that, and I also understand the feedback piece that looks like you should change how you communicate to make me happy. And I have a real rub with that piece of that. I say it like this. Do you remember being in elementary school when a teacher had you get up to present and you had to hit all of these check marks, and then if you didn't, right? So if you didn't stand up straight, if you wiggled too much, if your eyeball went crazy, or if you tried to do something creative that didn't match with that other person's formula, then you were somehow wrong. And I think that's the wrong way to go about teaching people how to communicate, because communication is this beautiful rainbow of abilities and styles and textures.
It's huge.
It's huge. And we, I think, instill a lot of fear and a lot of suppression and a lot of conformity into how people communicate. And I think we're doing a disservice.
And I think in your definition of communication, you were giving great examples, but beyond those spoken elements of communication, talk to me a little bit about communication without words and more at a human or emotional level. Because in some ways, people aren't taught to communicate those things either, that they've got barriers or things in their past that have prevented them to talking about emotion or interacting or responding to each other's emotions.
The unspoken communication rules often taught at home. So if I asked you right now to say, what were the unspoken communication rules that you learned at home? You can probably think of something.
Oh, yes.
Right? So right away I go to, if my dad, and we tease him about this, so I can talk about this, and if he listens, he'll know exactly what I'm saying. But my dad wouldn't have to say a word. But if you heard him go,
in through the nose.
And then that meant stay away. He's about to lose his patience. He doesn't need to say a word. You don't even have to see him.
Right.
All you have to do is hear that, and that's an unspoken communication rule. And we learn those things about each other the closer we are in proximity.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's both of us coming from healthcare. I was just at a conference and they were showing up on the display during the keynote a picture of a patient who is diabetic and going through their medications, and the person asked, talk to me a little bit about what you see in this photo. And almost everything people listed was an emotion that this person feels overwhelmed or alone or isolated or confused. Like, there was no writing on that picture. It was just a person in a moment, in a situation, and what everyone talked about was the emotions that person was feeling. And the presenter said, we as humans communicate most naturally through emotions, and language is something that like we use to try to interpret those emotions. And everyone was like, he basically mic dropped on all of us.
Yes.
It's like, and in healthcare right now, there's so many agendas and tools and technologies that exist that our communication is crowded out by noise, and we're not allowing ourselves to actually experience each other's emotions, which is that initial point of communication, and then having an actual conversation about those feelings and those events. And where we're at in our world right now, communication is just becoming more challenging because it's surrounded by so many noises. I think the most meaningful communication is person to person, and that's somewhat not cool anymore. It's
and people have labeled it as hard.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to look at a tablet and type something.
Yes.
And it's a very different beast to look someone in the eye and say that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, so back to healthcare, you're under these tremendous time constraints and billable hours, and let's go. And you're trying to check all the protocols and all the boxes. And you've never, or perhaps barely, met that other person's eyes to know, are they in pain?
Yeah.
Are they, like, where are they? Can I read them? And you make that point so well. You take a person who's got a brain injury, and they physically can't tell you. So you're looking for all the signs of what might be wrong. Are they fidgeting in their chair? If they're fidgeting, why are they fidgeting? What does this particular type of fidget mean?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's different. When there's one fidget that you're driving me crazy, and the other fidget is I have to go to the bathroom.
Right. Yeah.
And you have to become a master at looking
body
language and being willing to be in the space and put aside the pen, the paper, the tablet, the phone.
Yeah. I think that not just true in healthcare for the caregiver to patient interaction, but it's probably something you're experiencing, because I know you don't just coach people in the healthcare sector, but across multiple industries, that even in those settings, this thing is played out over and over and over, that everyone has pressures on them to be productive or to fulfill a requirement or check a box. So almost all of their interactions within the workplace, and I'll be honest, like sometimes it flows into the household. There's certain times where, you know, I'm having a conversation with my wife and I'm distracted and I'm not fully present. But, you know, in these situations, one, like, we're not adequately prepared to communicate in that way, where it's face-to-face or person-to-person or about emotions. Like, we just haven't stretched those muscles. So that's one thing. But in the workplace, like, emotions are taboo. It's like, you shouldn't have emotions at work. So talk a little bit about, like, when you work with maybe an executive leader who's trying to communicate to their organization or to someone that they're responsible for leading, and kind of what, like, barriers you're seeing play out in that person's life.
So if I'm talking with an executive, a senior level executive, I can point out a scenario I just had where I'm in between a senior level executive and then the VP, and I'm sitting in the conversation, and he's listening with the ear of, how can I fix this? How can I get this done? And do it quickly and efficiently. And then this VP is coming from the angle of, I need to talk this out. And I want to process this through, and I want your input, and it's going to take time. And so you've got a direct speaker and an indirect speaker. So I see much of that, and I see a lot of conflict between those two styles. So somebody who get to the point and somebody who needs to talk it out. And I watch them, their language is different. So he's going to be short, quick, and abrupt. She's going to talk about her feelings. And so pointing out to him, saying, okay, Mr. Senior Level, she just said feel. So we need to acknowledge the fact that she said feel, because she's talking about an emotion. So when you hear that word, that's what she's talking about, which means your response needs to be couched in this way. Or on the flip side, I look at her and I say, okay, when you go to someone like this, I want you to think about, what do you really need? Do you need acknowledgement of your feelings? Some validation? Do you need brainstorming, or do you need feedback that looks like evaluation? So am I doing a good job? On a scale of 1 to 10, give me an evaluation of my skills. So I see a lot of those things happening. I see more people being willing to talk about emotions in the workplace because it's ultimately going to be unavoidable. We talked about the industrial mindset that we are all coming from, right? So industrial era mindset that sounds like productivity and inputs and outputs and there was a word results and all of those things, and we're not machines. And we're starting to see this push for, wait a second, we can't continue to operate like machines, nor do we think like machines. We really do think based on emotion, and we cannot shut that off. So how do we acknowledge them? How do we use them productively or, effectively in the workplace?
Yeah, I see such a huge need for people with your background and your passion to help people continue to develop their communication skills, because in certain institutions, and so you have that industrial mindset, and beyond that there are the organizations that prepare you to work and contribute and add value to those organizations. So you take my background, I have a degree in finance. Like communication as part of my core curriculum was like my freshman year in undergraduate. So I went through 7 years of college education, and the further I got into the curriculum, it became more about the analytics. So many people who are living in the business world, they show up ill-prepared to actually become an effective communicator, and oftentimes they don't even know that their communication's broken. So in some ways you're there and you're helping people wake up to realize that what you think is effective might not be, and there's tools that maybe you weren't exposed to in your education that you need to become aware of and practice intentionally to become a better communicator.
I like that you say practice, because there is no end point for learning how to be a better communicator. There isn't a certificate that says
you can't just graduate.
You don't get just graduate from the even the people with communication degrees. Hopefully I don't make them too mad, but it's a practice, and being a good communicator is something that is learned and honed over time, and that we're going to get it wrong lots and lots of times. So being willing to own that and then figure out how to get yourself into and out of that.
And I'm curious what your opinion is, but really the only way to measure the effectiveness of your communication is through the feedback that you get. So you send a message, and as you send that message, you're looking for a response, either in what that person says, but mostly in what that person does. So, in whatever relationship or whatever situation might be, you're trying to communicate. The only way to truly measure whether or not communication has been successful is in the response of that other person. How else would you kind of add to that, or maybe explain it a different way? Well, how do you measure effective communication?
I would say yes, and I would add self-reflection. So looking at, did I achieve the communication goals I set out for in that particular event? So many times we view communication as one-dimensional. Did I get my idea across?
Yeah, is it out of my head?
Is it out of my head?
On someone else's plate.
And on someone else's plate. And did I say what I needed to say? So to loop this back just for a second, you asked me what I saw in the workplace. I think I would be remiss if I didn't say what I see is a lot of talking and not a lot of listening. And so I would measure effectiveness of communication of how well did I understand what the other person said to me? Was I able to paraphrase that back? was I able to then respond in a way that was helpful and productive and meaningful to them versus so much of what I get requests for is I want to get my message across. And that's true. That's 100% right. And I will always help with that. And communication is reciprocal.
Yes.
So we've got to work on the listening piece.
Yeah.
A lot.
I agree.
A lot.
How
do you like that for a fancy word?
I have been blessed by people who will give me that feedback that I'm not always effectively listening. So I had to, because I would hear an idea and my mind loves to take ideas and just run with them. Yep. So as soon as someone said something that piqued my interest, like my mind shut off from what was being said to more of thinking down the road to how that idea can mature and grow and be executed, because I love to implement my background. But I realized that I got to stick with that person, because what they said that piqued my interest was really just the start of what they were trying to communicate. So I learned in improv a game, it's called First Word, Last Word. So I'm guessing you've played some improv games.
Yes.
And it was to stick with that person until they're done with what they were saying. You have to listen to the very last word they say. You have to take the last letter in their last word and make it the first letter of your first word.
Oh.
And so, that was my team's way of like saying, Tom, like sometimes you hear our ideas and you cut us off before we're all the way done, or we can see like your eyes start to dream a little, and we just want you to have a tool that helps you stick with us all the way until we're done. So that was one of the tools that helped me. And as you'd said, like, improving your communication is a journey, and that one's been one tool I've relied on, and I know there's so many more out there, and I can't wait to learn and benefit from them, because I want to be both an effective communicator, but mostly I want to be a better listener. So.
Yes. Well, and the best tool for listening is, can I repeat back what the other person said with accuracy, with confirmation? And we don't like to do that because that makes us feel uncomfortable. It makes us feel like we're in psychotherapy sometimes. And it's also very, very affirming for the other person. Let me make sure I got this right.
Yes.
Here are the 3 things that you said. Also, knowing that if you're going to say something in the middle of someone else talking, asking a question, are you finished? Is this a good place for me to ask you something? Is there more?
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of the question, what else?
Tell me more.
Tell me more.
Yes.
What else is there? And then I've actually heard that you're supposed to ask that 5 times. That's a lot. Most people maybe get 1 or 2, but asking what else, so that other person really has the chance to give you all the details, whatever their idea, their concept, their need, their problem. And digging deep into that, and then being able to tell it back to them, and allowing them the opportunity to tell you that you're wrong if you didn't get it just right.
Yes. So in facilitating teams, in my role, I was oftentimes the liaison between a sponsor who had an expectation to get a target met or achieve a certain goal, and then I would facilitate a team to execute on that work, to come up with the solutions, to have done the analysis, to break that problem into smaller, more actionable targets, kind of thing. So I was oftentimes that liaison, and with every team I'd work with, when that team would go to report out their recommendations or their findings, that would be shared with the sponsor, who has a lot of demands of them. They're in a role in which people really value their time and ask for a lot of it. So just having them in the room and being physically present was always something that conveyed to those teams that you're important, and the work you did is important. So being physically present and not on the phone when critical information is being shared is something that I know it's a must-have when you're working with an organization or working with project teams to help them feel heard. And then those ones that did it really, really well, they always would take and hear those recommendations and then repeat them back.
Yes.
And that was what you were kind of saying is that, and it was like the rewards and recognition of the team, like that just by listening to those team's ideas, repeating that you understood what their ideas were, and then giving them the opportunity to implement those ideas, that relationship between that project team and that sponsor blossomed because there was trust there.
Yes.
And that was, in some ways, that's why I'm addicted to the work that I do, because I love watching those parts of an organization, someone in sponsorship who's really far removed from the everyday work, and then the operators who actually deliver those processes day in and day out. Sometimes they're like worlds apart. But when you do projects like this and you bring those two together, the relationship that gets created is always better than whatever solution they plan to implement, because now there's an environment where they can rely on each other. Mm-hmm. And that's facilitated by communication.
Yep. When we talk about being heard, I think sometimes we confuse being heard with someone else having to take action. Mm-hmm. Many times a person is looking for, did you hear me? I'm not necessarily asking you to fix this. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily asking you to change it, but it's really important for me that you heard me. Mm-hmm. And then we can talk about all the other pieces and the whys and the why nots, but you don't get to move past that until the other person knows that they've been heard.
Yes.
So important.
I agree. And that is an important event in any interaction between people. Mm-hmm. So one of the other questions I asked in my podcast is, how does this passion of yours intersect with improvement? And I think we touched on a lot of intersections of people leading teams or trying to communicate a goal. It could even be a husband and wife or spouses having a conversation. Some of the things you were talking about make sense in a one-to-one relationship and a one-to-many relationship. But I want to ask that question of you is how do you personally see communication intersecting with improvement?
I mean, my very blunt and flip response is you don't improve without communication. Mm. Tell me where in improvement that you don't need it. Mm-hmm.
I think that'd be a great question to the listeners of this. Like,
yes.
You could think
is there a place where communication is not necessary for improvement? I don't think that I would be hard pressed. So
I can't think of any off the top of my head, and I've been involved in a lot of organizational transformations. Even talking to yourself, even in self-improvement. You can't effectively improve yourself unless you communicate to yourself that positive voice changing the way you talk to yourself, your talk style. That communication is also shown to help people improve the way that they talk to themselves. So I think your bluntness is accurate. I agree that you're never going to improve unless you first learn to communicate effectively. Mm-hmm.
And to continue to try to communicate effectively, back to practice and working that through. I love that you brought up how you talk to yourself, because I firmly believe that how you talk to yourself impacts how you communicate with other people. Mm-hmm. So if you are in your head telling yourself all the head trashy, terrible things, that eventually leaks out to other people.
Yes, yeah. And I'm assuming when you work with your clients and help them in their journey, has their guide, self-talk is likely a piece of that puzzle too.
Absolutely. Listening, it's amazing when you stop and listen to how other people will talk about themselves and the things that they would say about themselves that they absolutely would never say about another person unless they really hated them. Mm-hmm. And that's a different story. But the way that people talk to themselves is heartbreaking in many instances. Yeah. And a lot of high performers, so I think about people in improvement, a lot of high performers have used this to their advantage. Well, when I am hard on myself, I work harder, and then I get better, and then I do better. And so this has been a really effective tactic for me. And it is effective, right? So it's the military version of, that guy like yelling in your face.
Yeah, like the stoic approach.
Yeah, the stoic approach, which will get you places. I won't say that it won't get you to improvement, but I would argue that if you want exponential improvement, if you shift that voice,
yes,
you become endlessly powerful with how you can communicate, and the way your communication impacts other people.
And in our first exchange, when you and I got together, I know that's something you do for the people that you interact with, is to help them realize the words they use when they talk about themselves. So when I was sharing, I have a goal, I want to do this, which is put ideas in a book and create it. And I said, I'm already got to start on it, but I said, I want to write a book. And you said, well, you need to restate it that you are writing a book, or I want to run a marathon, or I want to, whatever the goal is. If you change the way you talk about that goal and objective, the energy is different, and that's going to make it more likely to occur.
Same with writing it down. I'm sure you've taught this, where you write something down, the likelihood that you will then pursue and achieve that is much, much greater. So same with how you talk. If you give yourself those wiggle room words, like I'm gonna do this. Well, gonna is pretty non-specific.
Yeah.
I am writing a book.
Yes.
The end.
Yeah, I'm going to do this. And that's been something that I was very fortunate to have as part of my running career. Is those coaches who would make me be specific about the things I wanted to achieve. And that led over into doing endurance races. So when I would dream about doing an Ironman and stuff, and I would talk to people that I wanted to share that experience with, like they would express interest too, and then I would wait for that interest to manifest into action. And sometimes it didn't, because they weren't talking to themselves in a way that made them realize that was totally something they could do. So as I, competed in marathons or Ironman, the only way I crossed that finish line was because I told myself I was, and that I was capable of it. And it was all, when you're, ready to give it up, you just have to assess, how am I talking to myself in this situation? Is this adding the energy I need to actually do this? Or is it pulling the energy away, maybe in the form of an excuse? And my coaches would not allow any excuses. And I'm thankful for that, because I've experienced my capabilities as an athlete because of that. And doing some amazing race experiences, and I shared them with my family and my friends, and I hope I role modeled to them that if you tell yourself you can do it, you can.
Yeah. So I am. There is great power in I am.
Yes.
For sure.
I love this conversation, everything we're talking about. But we're going to have to bring it to an end. Maybe there's another episode for you and I later down the road. But as I bring this to an end, I know that the story you just shared in the conversation we just had to have rang true with some people who are listening to us. So for those people, I want to make sure they know how to find you. Sure. What ways can they get connected? So
I'm on all the social media outlets. I'm Alex Raffato Perry on LinkedIn. I am at PS with Alex I'm on Twitter, but honestly, if you connect with me on Twitter, you're never, I can't do the tweeting thing yet. I'm getting there. But at PS with Alex on Instagram and on Facebook. You can find my website at www.pswithalex.com, or you can email me at alex@pswithalex.com. That's a lot of Alexing.
I know.
It's a lot of Alex.
Yes.
But that's good.
And don't worry, I will put those in our podcast notes as I share this, and that way people don't have to memorize those links. But yes, finding you on LinkedIn, it's been a lot of fun because you're very active on there, and you share celebrations for the people that you're helping. And I love to watch these people blossom. So that's been my favorite medium to follow you, is through LinkedIn. So I do want to end with one last question, though, and I already told you that this question's coming.
This is a good question.
Yeah, so what's the next big scary thing that you're going to do?
All the things. So the next big theory, I have two. Can I say two?
Yes.
All right. So because a little, always have something on the calendar. Yes. So they're tied together. So I wrote a book called Minivan Mogul. and it's a crash course in confidence for women. And so that I've done the big scary part of writing it and getting it out, and it's at a publisher and all of those pieces, so it's coming out.
Okay.
But the next big scary piece that follows that is the podcast. That is all around crash courses in confidence for women. So I am incredibly pumped about that. Also terrified. I speak all the time, and you can put a microphone in front of me and I'm like, I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I need to re-record that.
Microphone syndrome.
I have all the classic human things that people have, and I have the passion and the willingness to go out there and try anyway.
So you've got a book.
Yeah.
It's written.
It's done.
It's coming out when?
So tentative date is in end of May. Okay. So we're in the process of figuring all those pieces out right now, but it should be in hands in summer.
You can say May-ish.
May-ish.
Yeah, and then there's like a rounding that people will come up with
6
themselves.
months.
Yeah, 6 month rounding.
Like, how do you define ish?
Yeah.
Back to communication.
Yes. So in that, there's some events and activities you're doing surrounding the launch, right? You're going to podcast.
Yes.
And then promote as well. So you're going to be doing some speaking engagements and promoting it.
Yes. Linking Indie Women will be the first place where I talk about the book, and then plan on talking about it with anybody that'll listen to it. And all of the things. There'll be a book launch party.
That is a big scary thing.
Yeah.
But you've got an amazing tribe of people that are going to help you to do it and to have fun while doing it.
Yes.
It makes, in some places, it's a heavy lift to do it and get it out there.
Yes.
But as you've done it, you're going to have such a profound impact. Your scale, your ability to reach and connect with people, it's going to happen, and it's going to be totally worth it. And your tribe's going to help pull it all together. Don't think you're going to have to do it all on your own.
Oh, I don't. So there's a quote in the book that I love that I wrote. It's actually my own quote, which is, a minivan trumps a Maserati every time. Because there is always room for more people in a minivan.
That's true.
So when you say tribe, I'm like, come on.
Yeah, let's load them up.
Load them up. Everybody, I will take all of the people that I can get all day long.
I look forward to that release and to reading that book and to celebrating it with you.
Thank you.
Very exciting. And thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And we'll see where things go from here. I'm going to wait with bated breath to watch that book come out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.